This production is brought to you by In the Dugout, your home of the beautiful game.
Hello everybody and welcome back to a long-awaited return of the Dugout Debate, brought to you by In the Dugout, your home of the beautiful game. It's good to be back. We've been away for a while. Josh, Chris, you excited to be back?
Always, yeah.
Of course,
My
yes.
favourite time of the week. After Year 9's Mrs. Roll Geography lessons.
And whatever time of the week Liverpool play any club that's below 17th, I would imagine.
Yes.
But yeah, it's good to be back. And that comment actually leads us very nicely on to our picture of the week, which is a slightly aghast, slightly confused and angry looking Jurgen Klopp. So, guys, what is Jurgen Klopp doing in this picture?
I
Chris,
think
you
I've
can
got,
kick us off.
yeah, I was going to say, I think I've got more for this one. So is he just debating, he's going, Lovren, Klavan, who's the least useless defender to replace Matip?
More like Van Dijk. Actually, no. Is it my reaction when I saw Alex in his cap and Chris's bum fluff?
Potentially.
Definitely.
Mate, if you saw my lid under this, you would understand. Trust me.
It must be bad.
Is Klopp asking why £75 million can't buy you a clean sheet?
Well, speaking of that, is it his response when after spending 75 million on Van Dijk, he's then lost to the two bottom teams in the league?
This is really hurting my feelings. I'm not
Despite, beating the runaway leaders as well. Ironically, when Virgil van Dijk didn't play.
Yeah, so...
Shall I just
common
celebrate
denominator.
something over this? Shall I just sit here like this so that no one realises what's going on? Protect my dignity.
Is he performing the hand gesture that the Leeds board are going to use to replace this?
Is it Jurgen Klopp realising that his initials reflect his managerial style?
That's good.
I respect that.
Is he just bemused that they've lost the West Brom Cup?
They'll still do a parade around the pitch.
Good
Just
club,
that
man.
in front of the cop,
No, it is of course his response some way through the game in which they got absolutely battered by second bottom West Brom in the FA Cup.
Yes, of course. So despite, the best attempts of VAR to salvage a result for Liverpool, of course, last night at the time of recording, Liverpool went out to West Brom 3-2 in the fourth round of the FA Cup, which is something Josh going to lead discussion in now.
Right, so yes, as both I and Alex just said, hilariously, Liverpool lost 3-2 at home in the FA Cup fourth round to 19th place West Brom. Bearing in mind that Liverpool have got their new £75 million centre-back Virgil van Dijk, the world's most expensive defender ever, they're still conceding goals. I'm going to come to you first, Chris, just so Alex can have more time to stop crying. Can we see Van Dijk making a difference as the season goes on, or do we think that Liverpool's defence is going to be conceding goals no matter who's in the back?
Well, it's a bit of a given that Liverpool will concede, but they still have that sort of mentality of, well, if we can concede however many, but we'll score more than you, except against West Brom, of course.
Yeah,
but,
and Swansea, they didn't score at all.
That's by the by. I feel like Van Dijk's confidence has been sort of dented a bit with the whole saga around Southampton. He was frozen out of the team for a while because he wanted the move. But I feel like it's all just about just giving him time to get back into the game, get his style and his head sorted, get settled into that Liverpool back line. It should be fine. But it also depends heavily on who's playing alongside him, because I already joked about how they've got three completely incompetent centre-back partners to pair him up with. Probably Klavan is the least, defensively, I suppose, well, how do I put it? Just rubbish.
Mistake prone.
Yeah.
mistake prone, perhaps. But
PG language, Chris. PG language.
PG-13 family friendly channel.
Yeah.
Of
Okay.
course.
So building on what Chris said about not having a centre back partner for Van Dijk. So Alex, do you think that whoever he gets partnered with, if Liverpool are conceding, then unless it's an outright mistake from Van Dijk, then the other partner will get the blame? Or do you think that he has to take some responsibility, even in the last couple of games, for Liverpool's shortfall?
I think that with regards to the fans, certainly it's going to be a very, very long time before people start blaming Van Dijk for stuff, because we spent 75 billion on him, and none of us are going to want to admit that it was a mistake. So none of the fans are going to blame him for anything unless it's literally unbelievably obvious. That being said, genuinely, in the Swansea game, the goal was totally not his fault. I know people joking, no, Van Dijk's header was terrible, he assisted the goal. But the reason his header was terrible, if you look, is because Liverpool have always done zonal, which is not something I understand, but zonal marking from corners. And he was literally competing with two of his other centre-backs who shouldn't have been going for the ball in order to get that ball. So it's like, that's not his fault. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch the West Brom game yesterday, but I heard that some of the mistakes were from sort of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Gini Wijnaldum. So I think it would be fair to give him some time before we start criticising him. Obviously, it's not been an ideal start to his Liverpool career. But you've got to reach a certain point. If it continues to happen, if we spend 75 million on somebody who is very obviously a technically very talented centre-back, then if it gets to 2-3 months' time and we're still conceding loads of goals, the same as we did before we got him, I think you need to ask questions not of Virgil van Dijk himself, but we've brought in now him whilst he's been good for Southampton, Lovren whilst he's been good for Southampton, Matip when he was good for Schalke. And you've got to sort of say, is it our system? Is it our coaching?
Okay, final question on Van Dijk. When he signed, the reason we're talking about this transfer is because we've not recorded since he joined. When he signed and when the build-up to the transfer was happening, the deal itself was compared to that of Rio Ferdinand when he joined Manchester United in 2002. I think he became the world's most expensive defender at the time. Did both of you, or either of you, see any parallels in the two deals?
Again, I think some time needs to be given. I think, well, how old was, because Rio was quite young when he transferred from Leeds to Man U,
probably about
wasn't he?
23, 24, I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah. I think he's a little bit younger than Van Dijk is, if I'm not mistaken. I think Rio had more time to develop, I think, than Van Dijk did at Manchester United. And I think before you make the comparisons, you've got to look at the fact that Ferdinand was good before he came to Manchester United, but developed to being world-class whilst he was at United. It remains to be seen whether the same will happen with Van Dijk. You've also got to bear in mind that there's no doubt that Sir Alex was a far more defensively, tactically astute manager than Jurgen Klopp is. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. So I think it's quite difficult to draw parallels in the sense of, especially at the moment, there's very little basis for comparison based on the situations and the development time that Ferdinand was actually given at Manchester United.
And Chris, final words?
Let's just, it's a given that Liverpool will concede. So, I mean, this is just going to be a continued problem. We're going to constantly be talking about Liverpool conceding sloppy goals because it's just funny, but no other reason. That's it. That's it from me.
I guess the conclusion is as long as Jurgen Klopp's in charge, it doesn't really matter who's defending because going to concede goals. But anyway, that's enough on Chris. Thank you. That's enough on Virgil van Dijk for this week. Anyway, we'll probably be tracking his progress as the weeks go on. But it's back over to Alex for our fantasy team.
Yes, so of course this is our fantasy league section. As anybody who watches the show regularly will know, we have an I-Team league. Yeah,
it's me.
We do have a fantasy I-Team league, which has been going on ever since the start of the season, and we haven't recorded in a while. However, the overall tables really have not changed that much. As has become customary at this point, Josh is still a long way ahead at the top of the league. With Chris,
can I dab? I'm dabbing.
No. Oh, I hate you. With Chris in second and myself in third. Miles ahead of the rest of the pack, apart from, of course, Matt Stack, who is currently leading the month. He's 7 points ahead of me, which is very frustrating because I've had a good month as well. But we'll come on to that in a second, of course. We're going to talk to Chris and Josh about how their I-Teams is shaping up as well. So we'll come to you first, Chris. What's going on with your I team?
Well, to be honest, my team's not changed a lot since we last recorded. I've still got David De Gea in goal because he's still a very he's adept in between the sticks. You know, he always.
I think that's something of an understatement about the best
Big
goal
save
in
Dave.
the world.
He's Big Save Dave. He gets extra save points. He gets clean sheet points. He's great. I've had a bit of trouble in recent weeks with defenders from Arsenal because I had at one point Bellerin, I believe, and then he got injured. So I swapped in Mustafi and he conceded far too many goals for my life and got 1 point in all his time with me. So now I'm hoping that Monreal can do the business, bearing in mind...
Monreal's been doing bits.
He's done well. He got, a goal and 2 assists in Arsenal's previous league game, I think it was.
Yeah,
Also got Cesar Azpilicueta still in there. He's been pretty good. He's been keeping clean sheets. And I've got Davinson Sanchez as well. Pretty good for Spurs. That's my back 3. I've got a 5-man midfield now. I've still got Mr. Pascal, as I'm going to continue to refer to him for as long as he's in my team.
We're not having this argument again.
Or Grace.
I've got Kevin De Bruyne, of course, been absolutely sensational this season, as of most of the City players. Recent addition is actually Dele Alli, also of Spurs. So he's been doing quite well, I believe. He's been popping up with a few assists recently. Mo Salah, I've got him captained at the moment because Liverpool are facing Huddersfield and, well, hopefully, providing they don't monumentally cock up like yesterday.
They probably will, let's face it.
They probably will, but, well, actually, Jurgen Klopp and David Wagner are best mates, so Klopp will probably give him the 3 points. But yeah, hopefully Salah can pop up with some goals or some assists. And then final man in midfield is Leroy Sané, again, been really good for City. Similarly, up front, the 2 strikers, Aguero and Kane, both have been in sensational form, scoring loads of goals. And that completes my team.
Good stuff. Josh, what about you? How's your team shaped up?
Okay, so when Chris said that he brought in some Arsenal defenders, I'm going to say that's to emulate me, the leader of the table.
What, just like you
when I've not finished speaking yet. When Chris tries to emulate me, it goes badly. When I emulate him by bringing Harry Kane as my captain to maintain my lead, it works wonders, doesn't it? Yeah, I've still got Czech in goal. Got Otamendi, which is probably since we last recorded a new addition. He's kept a couple of clean sheets, but City have not been so tight defensively in recent weeks, so that's not been such a wise addition. Still got Bellerin and Kolasinac, and then in the midfield got De Bruyne here. I think that speaks for itself, really. Pogba, since his return, he's I think got 3 or 4 assists, so that's been quite a good addition. Son Heung-min, who's been phenomenal alongside Dele Alli, who hasn't been in my squad from the beginning, but since I brought him in, since he's refound his form, he's done actually very well for me. And obviously Harry Kane up front, who I captained last week, as I just said. Alongside Kane is Aguero up at the front, and also from City is Raheem Sterling, who is, I think, City's top scorer this season, unless that's changed. He's certainly up there if he's not at the moment.
Might have changed because of last week.
Yeah. So I've got a pretty solid group of players. The problem with having such a solid group is that it's difficult to make transfers. But I'm sure we'll work something out, and I'll tell you all about that next week. So yeah, sitting pretty, 133 points at the top. Closing in for the
Not
month.
very specific.
Closing in for the month. Hopefully, we'll see how the next couple of game weeks turn out. And that's all for me, really.
Okay, good stuff. So that finally brings us to me. So I'm currently sitting in 3rd place. Like I say, having a decent month myself, hoping to close in for that as well. With regards to my team, in goal, I've got Edson Moraes. I mean, I couldn't afford David De Gea. It's basically my reasoning. And City's defence, generally speaking, mainly because teams don't attack them because they're scared of them, has been fairly decent. So my logic there is that Edson's going to get a few clean sheets just because people are too scared to attack City. But someone should have told that to Newcastle because they didn't seem to follow the script last weekend. In defence, I have 2 Manchester United defenders, which is kind of based on the fact that United are good defensively, and I can afford their defenders. I've got Antonio Valencia and Phil Jones, who tend to bring me a fair few clean sheet points, with Antonio Valencia also occasionally popping up with an absolute screamer. And then my other defender in a 3-back defence is Stephen Cook, also because I didn't have a huge budget to work with. Bournemouth don't exactly keep a great amount of clean sheets, but it seems to me that since I brought him in, Bournemouth seems to be practicing corner routines that usually involve Steve Cook scoring. So, I mean, whatever works, I'm going to keep him in there out of sentiment for that. I have a four-man midfield, starts off with Eden Hazard. So, I mean, again, speaks for itself. Incredibly creative midfielder, also takes Chelsea's penalties, so always a good chance of getting some points there. Paul Pogba, same reason as Josh, since he's come back, is massively influential in that United team. I don't think they've lost in a ridiculous number of games since he's actually started. And he tends to pop up with goals and assists as well. And then my other two midfielders are Mane and Mo Salah from Liverpool. Obviously, the last 2 weeks haven't been particularly indicative of this, but Liverpool tend to be pretty free scoring, and Mo Salah is up there with the top scorers in the league again. Probably would be top scorer if Harry Kane was actually human. But he's always a good bet to pop up with a goal, as is Sadio Mane. And alongside that, I actually currently have Lacazette in my team, but I'm going to be bringing in Roberto Firmino because having a couple of bad games against poor opponents happens, but generally speaking, at some point you'll due a result. And I'm hoping that this game against Huddersfield will be when Liverpool due a result and get a few goals through those three. And that brings me on to my attack. The first one is Aguero, who I thankfully captained last week, as he got a hat-trick, which was a brilliant decision in the end, thankfully, because I think I've captained him for like the last 6 or 7 weeks. He's not actually done anything, so he's finally paid some dividends. Like the other guys, got Harry Kane up front, speaks for itself. And until I sub him out after the Swansea game, I've got Alexandre Lacazette, who I'm hoping it will be one of those games where Arsenal just happily run away with the game. It totally depends on which Arsenal turns up. And if they do, then hopefully Lacazette will start a run which leads to him finding his form again and keeping his place if Aubameyang does come to Arsenal in the summer. But that does bring to an end our Fantasy I-Team section. We'll obviously keep you guys updated with how that continues to go. And next up, I believe, is our phrase of the week, which I believe Chris is hosting, so I'll pass it over to him.
So yes, as is customary, we have our phrase of the week. And this week, it also comes from the FA Cup. Just a little teaser for you at home, all two of you.
It doesn't. It doesn't come from the FA Cup.
The phrase...
It does not come from the FA Cup, Chris.
Oh, calm down. The phrase is, for that price, it's fantastic. So what on earth could this phrase be, lads?
Is it how every Liverpool fan has described their flop signing, Virgil van Dijk?
Bit harsh. Is that me deliberating whether or not to, when being desperate to get home from a night out, get an Uber with Marcos Alonso?
Yeah. Is it how Diane Abbott described spending £300,000 on 10,000 policemen?
Similarly, is it Diane Abbott describing the fact that Arsenal season tickets are only a tenner?
Speaking of Arsenal, this is brilliant.
Oh, this is wonderful.
It's like ping pong.
When the Arsenal board were discussing building the Emirates, and someone suggested that it would involve finishing outside the top four eventually, only winning the FA Cup, what was Wenger's response?
I haven't got a segue for this. Speaking of Arsenal being terrible at competitions and leaving Europe early, that's terrible. Is that what nobody said about Brexit ever?
Because it's not true.
Do you know what's mad? I said to Chris beforehand, I've just written a response that I know Josh's exact response will be to be look at the camera blankly and be like, no.
So you are the prophet. I've not finished yet. Again.
I lost track of how many you both said.
Is it how Liverpool fans responded to their star signing of Falkirk's Tony Gallagher?
Hey, Tony Gallagher is a quality signing. How dare you? No, it is of course Jose Mourinho talking about what would arguably be a slightly higher profile signing than our wonderful new Falkirk starlet, which is of course Alexis Sanchez moving to Manchester United from Arsenal.
That's correct. The Chilean winger has finally made the move to Arsenal, from Arsenal to Man United in perhaps what's been the biggest transfer story of this window. And we're going to segue, of course, to the Man United fan on our panel, Josh, so he can lead the discussion about Sanchez's move.
So that's probably one of the biggest transfers, if not the biggest transfer of the January transfer window, was Alexis Sanchez's move from Arsenal to Manchester United, and indeed Henrik Mkhitaryan going the other way. Do you guys know where Arsenal's logic is in letting, once again, one of their huge stars go to Manchester United? I would say league rivals, not so much anymore, but certainly fierce rivals historically. Where is the logic in that?
I think it's situational, to be honest. I think Arsenal were kind of out of options, because there's no doubt that Alexis Sanchez was leaving either in January or in summer. And if he was leaving in January, he was leaving for a cut price, and if he was leaving in summer, he was leaving for free. So they needed to offload him somehow, realistically, this window, because they're not going to get anything out. The best they're getting out of this season is maybe the Carabao Cup and top 4 if they're lucky, but I don't back them to do that even with Sanchez. So if I'm the Arsenal board, I'm thinking we need to get rid of Sanchez this window, and they probably would have got rid of him for something like 35 mil tops, because he's so cut price, because they needed to get rid of him. And in this transfer market, who do you bring in for 35 million? Realistically speaking, in my opinion, Mkhitaryan, I know he's not had the greatest form with Manchester United in the last sort of couple of months, but he is a better player than Arsenal could have got for the 35 million that they would have otherwise got for Sanchez. So I think ideally they probably wouldn't have wanted to sell him, but they knew they were going to have to at some point. And I think realistically, this was a case of making the best out of a bad situation. And I think getting Mkhitaryan is probably the best they could have done out of it.
Building on that, Chris, who gets the better deal?
I have to say it's United, because Sanchez, you've got someone who has played in the Premier League for, 3.5 seasons already. So he's already well bedded into the the style of the Premier League. Mkhitaryan was at Man United for 1.5 seasons, and he's already making a switch to another team. So it's going to take him a bit more time to perhaps adapt to the Emirates, having fewer fans watching you each week in their vapid, no atmosphere stadium, and going to have to deal with, of course, Arsenal Fan TV criticising every performance you make. But I don't know. We already saw Sanchez make his debut for Man United. I mean, it was against League Two Yeovil, but he played well. He got 2 assists.
Yeah, and man of the match.
Yeah, and man of the match, which I think...
I'm not entirely sure how he was man of the match, though.
Yeah, it was good.
I think people were looking for him to do well in that game. Yeah. I think it's fair to say that.
Like that's probably heavily sort of media biased, giving him man of the match, but I don't know. He did play well that game. I did catch some of it, but yeah.
Did you guys hear Martin Keown commentating on that game?
Yes.
Oh,
it was absolutely hysterical.
He is so bitter. It is hilarious.
It's so funny. He was absolutely fuming.
He always manages to bring in that he was an invincible into it somehow.
No, it's because he absolutely hates United after Pizzagate. No, actually before Pizzagate, I think it was, when... that's another story anyway. When Van Persie missed his penalty and all that sort of thing. Final question on this. I know it's going to be a slightly controversial thing to say, but let's just say we call Mkhitaryan a United flop, because if you sell a player after a season and a half, things probably haven't gone too well for you. The 2 ones that immediately spring to mind where for United flops have gone on to Premier League rivals and done equally as badly was one Sebastian Veron when he went to Chelsea, and Radamel Falcao when he went to Chelsea, and they both flopped at United and at Chelsea, which suggests the Premier League wasn't for them. Do we think that the same might apply to Henrik Mkhitaryan?
I think in the case of Falcao, I don't think it's comparable, because I think Falcao was already on a very steady decline before he even came to Manchester United. So he wasn't a great player who came to United, flopped, and then continued to flop. He was already got on sort of a downwards trajectory by the time
he returned to Monaco and then was playing pretty well last season.
Damn right.
Yeah, I think it was pretty soon after his pretty serious injury that he ended up going to Man United. So I feel like that probably hampered.
And he never gave himself a chance to settle anywhere. So it was a bit of a weird one. With regards to Mkhitaryan, I think he has at various different points in his United career shown, elements of talent and glimpses of talent. I mean, at the start of the season, he had 7 assists in 5 games. He was playing brilliantly at the start of the season. But what he strikes me as something of a confidence player, and having been benched and then sort of cast aside by Jose Mourinho, that might have been something that hurt his confidence. So it'll be interesting to see when he slots into that Arsenal team, whether the confidence floods back, whether he starts to fire the same way that he did at Borussia Dortmund, especially if Arsenal bring in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, which obviously was a very, very prolific combination in the, is it 2015-16 or 2014-15 season? I can't remember.
It would have been the season before we bought Mkhitaryan, so 2015-16.
Yeah, where I think Aubameyang got 40 goals and Mkhitaryan was a top assist maker in the Bundesliga. So I would hesitate so far to say that he's a Premier League flop or even a Manchester United flop. And I think my gut feeling is that he'll actually do all right at Arsenal.
Okay, well that concludes our chat on Sanchez, which is probably, I said at the beginning, possibly, I think without question, the biggest transfer of the window. Hopefully he'll lead us to some silverware and eventually the league title, but hey, we'll see. So moving on to Chris, I believe, for the Premier League predictions, which we've got 2 weeks to cover this week. So over to you, Chris.
So yes, alongside our Fantasy League and our Premier League's final table predictions, we do have the predictions for every single game week so far in the Premier League. Because we've had quite a little sort of gap, well I say little, it's a big gap in recordings, you may not believe us when we've still been keeping track, but honestly we have. We've got 2 game weeks to go through because we've got midweek fixtures as well as the ones in the upcoming weekend. So we'll just kick on straight away with all the games. We're not going to go into any real detail about any of them because there's so many. We'll kick off with game week 25. Starts with Swansea hosting Arsenal. I'll come to you first, Alex. How do you think that game's going to go?
I don't think Swansea's win over Liverpool has anything to say about them. I think Arsenal will win comfortably 2-0.
I've gone for the exact same result.
As have I. So hopefully that's great minds.
Or equally bad ones.
Next up we come to, in a bit of a dip, perhaps West Ham, who are hosting Crystal Palace. West Ham, who were knocked out by 2013, was it 2013 FA Cup winners Wigan?
Yes. Oh yeah, 2-0.
Knocked out by,
shout Ben Watson, doing the Gingers proud.
Yeah, shout out to Will Grigg, went to our school.
Shout out to Will Grigg, well done, lad. What do you think the score's going to be for that?
Tactical masterclass, I think. It's going to be West Ham 2, Crystal Palace 1.
Oh, I've gone with the reverse, so I think Palace will take it.
And I have gone right down the middle. I've gone for a 1-1 draw.
So one of us is getting points.
At least one of us.
One of us.
Now we come to, the team that were knocked out by second bottom West Brom. We've come to Liverpool, who travelled.
Are they still in the Premier League, Liverpool?
Apparently so. I mean...
Wow.
We're fourth. Go away. Leave us alone.
More to the point, what do you think the score's going to be?
I said that it's one of those ones where I hope it's going to be you've had a few bad games and then you're due one. However, we're us and we're away from home, which means that we're going to concede. So I've gone for a high-scoring 4-2 win for Liverpool, which almost certainly just isn't going to happen. But a man can dream. Well,
Liverpool have got their £75 million centre-back. They've still got Mo Salah, who's top scorer in the league. They've got Firmino. They've got Mane. So on the basis of that, I've gone for a 4-0 Huddersfield win.
Yeah.
Nah, 3-1 Liverpool.
Yeah, I've gone for a 3-1 win as well to Liverpool. As much as I'd love to say 3-1 Huddersfield, just because of how funny it would be, I'm afraid I can't do that.
We're not recording next week if Liverpool lose to Huddersfield.
Chris and I will be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, have fun.
We'll get our very popular viewer Matt's attack on.
Yeah, of course.
To be fair, he'd probably do a better job than me. He's doing better than me and I team at the moment.
Anyway, next game, Chelsea hosting Bournemouth.
2-1 Chelsea. Not too much to say, just 2-1 Chelsea.
2-0 Chelsea. Can't see them conceding to Bournemouth.
2-0 Chelsea as well. Hopefully, another clean sheet points from Azpilicueta.
Callum Wilson will score.
I mean, he probably will. Everton hosting Leicester.
Everton are rubbish. Leicester are actually all right this season so far, so I'm going 2-1 Leicester.
Everton were rubbish, and then Sam Allardyce took over, and although they've had a slight dip in form again, he's rejuvenated them, so I think they'll take a point, 1-1.
I've gone the same way as Alex. Leicester have come into some really good form, so I've also gone for a 2-1 Leicester win. Next up, Newcastle-Burnley. Of course, Newcastle, that takeover eventually falling through, so they're still stuck with Mike Ashley. And of course, this game will be taking place on deadline day, so expect no deals from from St James.
Yeah, true.
But how do you think that game is going to go?
See, I found this one quite difficult because I'm always hesitant to write Burnley off, but I don't know why. I just have a gut feeling that at home Newcastle are just going to take this, and if it's a game between Newcastle and Burnley, it's not going to be more than one goal in my opinion. So I think Newcastle are going to win 1-0, and we'll probably come back to this when it's some sort of 4-3-5-4 thriller, and I've just moaned about them not scoring goals. So, but yeah, I think 1-0 to Newcastle.
So I've got a different approach. I'm always hesitant to put Burnley to win, and every time I say they're going to draw or lose, they end up winning, and they've really surprised me. And I don't think Newcastle are going to provide too much of a challenge. So on that basis, 2-1 Burnley.
I've gone for a 1-1 draw because Burnley have sort of slumped a little bit recently. They've not won in quite a few games, if I remember right. And meanwhile, Newcastle, of course, they've been dealt a pretty tough hand with recent fixtures, but I feel like home advantage should help them to at least get a point from this game. Speaking of home advantage, next up is Southampton, who will play in the South Coast Derby with Brighton. How's that going to go?
I just don't particularly rate Southampton, to be honest. I think they're decidedly average, and I've actually been I know they're kind of struggling, but that being said, I've kind of been impressed with Brighton and Hove Albion, regardless of what's happened, so I've gone for a 1-1 draw.
See, I'm still convinced that both Southampton will survive and that Brighton will go down, and I say that because there's barely any points in, I think it's something like 9th to bottom. So 2 games and the whole bottom half can change. So having said that, I do think Brighton are in better form than Southampton. So on that basis, I think they'll just take it 1-0.
See, I've gone the other way. I've said a 2-1 Southampton win. I know Southampton don't really tend to score many at home, but they have just brought in Guido Carrillo from Monaco. Admittedly, he's only scored 4 goals for them, but, £19.1 million well spent. We'll see how it goes. Next up, runaway leaders, Man City, hosting the current holders of the West Brom Cup, West Brom.
I mean, West Brom swept aside a very weak opponent last night. Manchester City are a different kettle of fish, in my opinion, and I think City will beat them 3-0.
So I think this is really funny because Liverpool beat City, West Brom beat Liverpool. So if you're going to go full circle, City have to beat West Brom 3-0.
Well, I mean, by that logic, Bristol City beat you 2-1 in the League Cup. We beat Bristol City 5-0. So does that mean that Villa are better than United?
No, because you're in the Championship.
So are Bristol
It doesn't work when you're in the Championship.
No.
What's your point? No, I've gone
you get the opportunity to prove it.
I've got the same as Alex. I've said a 3-0 Man City win. Next up, Stoke hosting Watford, the 2 most recently appointed Premier League managers, Paul Lambert versus Javi Gracia. So how's that going to go?
No, Javi Gracia had a really illustrious career playing for Manchester City, Bayern Munich, Zenit St. Petersburg. No, but in all seriousness, no. I've never heard of Javi Gracia. I don't know who he is. So I've got no idea what his managerial pedigree is. That being said, I just legitimately think that Watford are a better side than Stoke. And even at the Britannia, I don't think Stoke are particularly strong, so I've gone for a 2-1 win for Watford.
Well, after Watford's wonderful start, I think they've had a bit of a fall from Gracia. And Paul Lambert has completely, in his 2 games in charge, just given them a kick up the arse. I think it's been commonplace for new managers, they've put something new into their teams. So I think Stoke will win 2-1.
Well, I don't know how you don't know more about Javi Gracia, Alex. I mean, he finished 9th with Ruben Kazan last season.
Oh, sorry.
And he lost his first game in charge yesterday away at Southampton. They won 1-0 and now in the last 16 of the Cup. But I do think that in his second game in charge, he'll get a point, 1-1 draw. And the final game of game week 25, Tottenham hosting Man United.
Definitely the game of the weekend. I think that I've gone for a 2-2 draw. My logic behind this is I'm hesitant always when United are away to a big team to predict a big scoreline because Jose tends to play generally for draws or very narrow wins away from home against big sides. But the way I see that happening is that United will sit back. I think the Spurs have enough attacking impetus to be able to get a goal from somewhere, whether that's a long shot from Eriksen or Ali or just Kane doing something ridiculous. At which point I think United will have to come out and play. And I think at that point it will become quite an open game. So that's the way I see the game going. That's why I've gone for it being sort of as high scoring as I have. So yeah, I've gone 2-2, and that's because I can't separate the two sides aside from that.
I just can't see United conceding. I'm not sure why. I just can't see Tottenham breaking the United defence. So on that basis alone, I've gone for a 2-0 United win.
See, I've gone for a 2-1 United win because Spurs don't really tend to do that well against fellow top teams in the league. So on that basis, I feel like United should nick this. So that concludes game week 25, but wait, there's more. We've got game week 26 to do now.
In what is definitely the most entertaining segment of our show.
Yes.
in our best bits in 5 years' time, there's more.
Should we rattle through these more quickly? Because I feel like this is just like...
Well, just do straight scores for this one.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay, fair.
about teams' recent form in the previous lot. Kicking off with Burnley hosting Man City.
3-0 City.
Same.
2-0 City. Bournemouth host Stoke.
2-1 Bournemouth.
2-1 Stoke.
2-1 Bournemouth. Brighton hosting West Ham.
2-1 Brighton.
2-0 West Ham.
2-1 West Ham.
I feel like this is, in the weakest link where they go around, they just hold up the names and don't say anything else. And at the end of it all, Chris is always the weakest link in prediction.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Of shame.
Goodbye, kicks Chris.
Right. Okay, Leicester hosting Swansea.
I've gone 3-1 Leicester.
1-0 Leicester.
2-0 Leicester. Sorry, Swansea, you're rubbish.
So Liverpool that one.
It's the worst week of my life.
What, worse than
The
Chris
worst
Campbell?
week of your life so far.
Don't make Simpsons references, Chris. Needs to stop.
Hams. Okay, right. Man United hosting Huddersfield.
2-0 United.
2-0 United.
3-0 United. Edgy.
What?
West Brom hosting Southampton.
An immensely entertaining 0-0 draw.
A slightly more entertaining 1-0 Southampton win. Sorry, Liverpool again.
A slightly less entertaining 1-1 draw. Arsenal hosting Everton.
2-0 Arsenal. Sorry, Everton, you're still rubbish. Even you can beat us.
I'm echoing Alex's sentiments.
I've actually gone for a 2-2 because I feel like this is the game that Arsenal tend to drop points.
I think that is the most rogue prediction we've had so far, apart from possibly 4-2 between Huddersfield and Liverpool.
The fact that Liverpool wins a bit of a rogue prediction.
A few weeks
Granted.
back, I predicted a 2-2 draw between West Brom and Stoke, so I think that's the most rogue thing I've done.
Yeah,
And
fair enough.
look at all the good it's got me. I'm 31 points behind Josh.
This is true.
Okay, Crystal Palace hosting Newcastle.
1-1.
2-0 Palace.
1-0 Palace. Liverpool hosting Tottenham, big game.
See, in my heart of hearts, I genuinely believe if I had to predict them both as in at the same time linked to each other, we're going to lose to Huddersfield and then we're just going to batter Spurs. Like, that's just the way it is. I genuinely think we can win this 3-1. I don't know why. I'm more confident against Spurs than I am against Huddersfield.
Again, I completely agree with Alex. I've gone for a 2-1 Liverpool win on the basis that, as Alex said, Liverpool do worse against the smaller teams and better against the bigger teams.
And I've gone for a 2-2 draw because I'm rubbish at predictions.
True. Now, and the lead gets extended.
And the final game we're going to be looking at Watford hosting Chelsea.
2-0 Chelsea.
1-0 Chelsea.
I've gone for 2-1 Chelsea. And that rounds off the predictions. And now, if I'm right, we're actually going to be heading into the actual dugout debate, which I believe is segueing back to Alex, if I'm right.
A section of the dugout debate called the dugout debate.
Exactly.
What is
So
this?
meta.
It's
Since, of course, it is time for the namesake of our show, which is, of course, the Dugout Debate. And this week, our question is, has the FA Cup lost its magic? And I'd like to apologise in advance if you hear some rogue barking in the background of this. Chris's dog has some sort of mental disability and likes to bark at balloons. So we apologise.
Dog.
We apologise in advance for that. But yeah, you know what the question is. Myself and Josh are both on the side of the FA Cup has lost its magic. Chris, being, the supporter of a club that has no other hope for actually playing any interesting opponents, is on the side of the fact that it hasn't. I will come to Josh first.
The championship, I'll have you know.
So, Josh, take it away. Why has the FA Cup lost its magic?
Before I start my argument, I'll say if Villa get relegated, then they'll play the Checker Trophy, so...
Yeah,
there's always that. Okay, so yes, has the FA Cup lost its magic? In my opinion, very much so. And I think there are two indicators as to why that might be, primarily. First of all, I think the FA Cup has become like the sort of the father of the League Cup, because the bigger teams use it as an opportunity to play their younger players or their reserve players. So you can tell it's not as important to them as, let's say, the teams in the low divisions, which obviously it's probably the biggest game of their season, if not in their history in some cases. But let's not forget that it's always the bigger teams that end up winning these trophies. Let's say Man United. Louis van Gaal won the FA Cup in his second season, but it still wasn't enough to see him keep his job. Arsenal is the only trophy they have won in the last 8-9 years, and still people are calling for Wenger out because it's not enough anymore. Winning the FA Cup is not enough for the big teams to satisfy their fans. They expect more, they demand more, and quite frankly, they should get more. Secondly, financially, it's not worth it anymore just to put all your eggs into the FA Cup basket. Because if you think about in the 80s and before the Premier League existed, before Sky had pumped all this money into the Premier League, the FA Cup was often, the final, was the only match that people would often see on TV. It was often the only match shown on TV. So it's the biggest event. Cup final day was the football event of the year. Nowadays, you've got, 3 Premier League fixtures at least a week. So it's less important. Let's take the two lesser teams who have won the FA Cup since the Premier League's existence. And they are Portsmouth, who won it in 2008, also finalists in 2010, relegated in 2010, and have been all the way down to League 2 and are slowly coming back up again. I know they've had other issues, but essentially you can tie it into focusing stuff in the wrong areas. Especially Wigan Athletic, winning the FA Cup in 2013, getting relegated in the same season, having gone down to League 1, back up to the Championship, back down to League 1 again. So I think it's clear to see that for the lower clubs for whom years ago, let's say Wimbledon, the FA Cup was the most amazing thing to ever happen to their club. You could argue that it's just not worth it nowadays for the league sort of catastrophe that it gives them. But that's all I've got to say for the time being.
Okay, Chris, do you want to go and rebut any of that, or are you just going to make your case for why the FA Cup has not lost its magic?
Well, I'm going to go with the latter because I think the FA Cup is still an incredible competition. It's one of the most well-respected competitions in the world in terms of not being a league, just rather a tournament, I suppose you could call it. I don't think it has lost its magic because you still get, as we've seen, even in this week alone, we've seen good cup sets. We've seen, like you were saying, with Wigan, who ended up winning the competition only a few years ago, now leading the way in League One, and they've already knocked out 2 Premier League teams in the forms of Bournemouth and West Ham, who were fielding relatively strong teams, admittedly. And then if you look back at last season, you had Lincoln City, who were a non-league team at the time, and ended up reaching the quarterfinals, which I think was the first time it happened in something like 114 years. So you do get these moments of magic, which still make the cup, I believe, worthwhile, because it's for those smaller teams that it really does matter. I mean, of course, with the bigger teams who do tend to win it, it may not be that much, but it's not so much about them anymore, I don't think. I think it's more about these smaller teams that can cause these upsets that really make it such a good tournament.
Okay, fair enough. So, I mean, there's not a huge amount to add to our case. Obviously, I'm on the side of Josh here. But I would like to say with regards to things like cup sets, I think it says a lot about the tournament itself that even you making a case for it is saying that the cup sets, people like Lincoln reaching a slightly higher round than people would expect them to, is genuinely more of an event than any team actually winning it. And I think it says a lot that all these sort of lower teams, lower to the Premier League going downwards, put everything into the FA Cup. Because admittedly, there is something to be said for those games where someone like Newport is going to go to Wembley. That's huge for them. But at the end of the day, like, it's a season on from Lincoln causing a couple of upsets. Do you remember it? Yes, but do we regularly talk about it in the same way that we would regularly talk about Leicester winning the league? No, we don't. And the fact of the matter is that even when the big clubs don't particularly care about it until they get to about semi-finals, the big clubs still win it every single time. And until that point changes, I don't think there is any magic in it, because it's a bunch of people that don't care about it winning something they don't care about, being like, hey, we got a trophy that's just one more statistic for them. So in my head, like, as far as I'm concerned, I like, if Liverpool go out of the Champions League, obviously that'll hurt me. We went out of the FA Cup fourth round for the third season in a row to West Brom yesterday, and it pissed me off that we lost to West Brom. But do I care that we're out of the FA Cup? Not even remotely. So that's my argument.
As to we abuse you about it, I suppose.
That's true. It depends how much depression you drive me towards. But no, that's basically my additional case for why the FA Cup's lost its magic. So I'll head back over to you guys now if either of you want to rebut points that each other made. I'm sure Josh definitely wants to say some stuff, as he normally does. So I'll head back over to you, Josh. What you have to say?
Well, firstly on Chris, when you said Lincoln City, now I'm going to ask you both the question. What do we remember more? The fact that Lincoln reached a quarter-final or Pastygate? In my opinion, it's Pastygate. That was the biggest scandal. That hit the news headlines more than Lincoln City reaching the quarter-final. I think it's sad, but it's the sad truth. And I think if we're getting moments that sort of the commercialisation, if you like, of the FA Cup, where some fat guy eating a pasty is overriding the fact... It's the fact that a non-league club has got to the quarter-final. And I think that is an indicative of how football has become as a whole. Yes, okay, it's a good thing that a non-league club gets to the quarter-final, but how bad is it that gets overshadowed by something so stupid and something so commercialised? But something that I want to... There's two other things I want to add to the mix. First of all, the Cup Winners' Cup, which is no more. Now, if a team wins a domestic trophy, they go into the Europa League. The Cup Winners' Cup was very, very special, I think, because it got the teams in their own tournament. It didn't have the sort of the teams that dropped out of the Champions League. It could often be teams like the Wigans playing against their counterparts in these big European tournaments. United winning the Cup Winners' Cup in '91 is still regarded as one of our biggest European nights, bigger than the Europa League, I might add. And secondly, I think one of the big no-nos, where Wembley has gone wrong, or the FA has gone wrong, is allowing the semi-finals to be played at Wembley and allowing Tottenham Hotspur to play at Wembley. Because the whole point of playing at Wembley is that it's a neutral venue, it's a massive stage. But for example, Tottenham players, if they're playing there half the season, or if you're playing there in the semi-final, it's less prestigious, it's less grand. And to be quite frankly honest, I think that the finals were better when they were played at the Millennium Stadium than they have been at the new Wembley.
You've also got to bear in mind as well that we're not just talking about, when you're talking about the fact that Spurs play half their games at Wembley, you're talking about the fact that semi-finals and the finals are being played at Wembley. You've got to bear in mind that Wembley has become so commercialised at this point that they have a YouTube match every year at Wembley, which is literally just YouTubers playing a game of football, but at Wembley. That's like a huge event, which is all part of the sponsorship that goes along with Wembley as well. And if I remember correctly, I think they do a Wembley moment of the year to like poll every year where it's like brackets, and then eventually one big Wembley winner comes out. And so little do people now care about some of the stuff that goes on at Wembley, is that I believe last year a good goal that was scored in that game of YouTubers was voted Wembley moment of the year over Coventry winning the playoffs or Coventry winning the Trek Trophy or something like that, over loads of big moments, amazing goals, cup wins. That's how little people now care, especially in our generation and going below, about Wembley. So I think that like, I agree with you that has something to do with the magic of the cup dying. And I think that part of the reason, I would like, if it's not dead, I think it's on a decline. And I think part of the decline is demonstrated by the fact that people of our generation and less clearly don't really seem to care about the stuff that actually goes on at Wembley. So I think that's indicative in and of itself that we don't really care equally what goes on in the FA Cup, and we're not talk about the Carabao Cup because A, it's not relevant to the debate, and B, because we all know the Carabao Cup's not relevant.
And C,
okay, go on.
not
I just want to add something for Chris to respond to. Do you think if Villa were in the Premier League, or certainly in the top half of the Premier League, that you'd be having the same opinion? Or is it because Villa are in the Championship, they haven't got many big events to look forward to, that they cling on to things like the FA Cup to give themselves these big moments?
Well, yeah, I feel like the FA Cup does help to build momentum if you're going to push for promotion. Because, I mean, look at Wolves. I mean, were Wolves playing? Wolves were knocked out, weren't they? Not Swansea knocked them out. But Wolves still have a runaway lead in the Championship at the moment. Villa, I hate to say it, we were knocked out by Peterborough, which was, let's just say, embarrassing. But
Hey, you're
but
Chris, look at the badge on my shirt. I'm not criticizing you.
Well, I only need to look at your hat and know that you're embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't really hampered our league form too much. But then at the same time, if you have a really good cup run, it can help to build this momentum to, I don't know, push for perhaps even winning the league if you're in the Premier League, getting into those top 4 spots. It can help. And I mean, it's a guaranteed Europe place, which is always relatively coveted, even if it is the Europa League.
Yeah, but okay, wait. Sorry to interrupt you, but I totally disagree with that, because it's not like you get put straight into the group stages, I don't think.
No, it's
like, if I remember,
qualifiers.
yeah, you get put into qualifiers. If you remember rightly, I think there's 2 seasons in a row that West Ham have been put into qualifiers and lost to some Romanian farmers. Like, you can say all you want about it being a big
But
bet.
that's nothing to do with West Ham winning the cup.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is you get put into qualifiers. You don't get put into the group stage, which means you have no guarantee of playing anybody of any worth. So you could be put up against the same Romanian farmers that West Ham did, for example, and you're like, okay, big European night away to, I don't know, Bucharest or somewhere.
Exactly.
And I know, but I can't think. Look, just some obscure European city or country is what I'm trying to say. And you go to a rubbish stadium, you lose, you come home, and that's your European journey over. That it's not quite as big as I think people. That's not as big to me as I think people think it is.
But then that's not really anything to do with the FA Cup, because West Ham.
No,
It is.
it's anything to do with the FA Cup, because let's just say, all right, let's use West Ham. Let's say West Ham win the FA Cup. They won't go into the group stage of the Europa League. They will go into the qualifying rounds of the Europa League against these completely obscure teams, as Alex is saying. So, okay, maybe West Ham as a literal example is not relevant, but the example of an English team winning the FA Cup, they don't start playing teams like, I don't know, who's in the league, like Sevilla, or they don't start playing these top, second tier European teams. They play these like the Maltese champions or the runners up of the Liechtenstein League. This is what Alex is trying to say. They're not big European nights. Yes, they're playing against a European team, but they're going to be selling DVDs of beating LDK Lutch of Poland, are they? I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Let me just clarify something. I'm literally reading it now. FA Cup winners enter the Europa League at the group stage.
Do they?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's the runners up if they're runners up.
In which case, I apologise wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
Well, no, because all right.
Clarify that for you. So
okay, well, thank you for clarifying. But even so, even in the group stages, they're not exactly playing world beaters, are they? They'll have maybe one, because I think it's like the Champions League. They have like the pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, pot 4 system, if I remember correctly. So they might be playing the runners up of the Spanish league, or 4th place, whatever. But they're probably will also be playing the Maltese champions or someone quite obscure. So I think, okay, maybe they're on the group stage. I think the point still stands that they're not big European nights playing in the Europa League, and that might sound ironic coming from a supporter of a team that's claiming European glory like it's the best thing that's happened in the post-Ferguson era, but they're not big European nights. They're not vintage. They're not going to start putting a star next to a team's name because they won the Europa League. It's a secondary trophy, much like I said the League Cup is to the FA Cup. I know that caused slight controversy, but the Europa League is not really a big deal. The FA Cup isn't a big deal much anymore.
Hypothetically, Chris, so Villa at the moment are fighting for playoff spots and arguably, if they continue a good run of form, automatic promotion if things go well. And let's say that last season Villa had won the FA Cup. You're currently in the European and you're looking at being in the Europa League group stages. I know they're over now, but just work with me here. Let's say you're in the group stages and you're still looking at promotion. Would you prioritise the Europa League, knowing that the likelihood is you'll go out in the group stages, or at best in sort of like the last 16, at the sort of detriment of a promotional playoff push, or would you sort of like go for the Europa League anyway, see how far you can get, see if you can get lucky enough to maybe get a tie against the Borussia Dortmund or someone, because that to me seems like a big dilemma for a sort of like lower like championship club or whatever. And the same could go for a lower Premier League club that's trying to fight relegation or fight for the Europa League, which they're realistically not going to win. And the fact of the matter is the big teams don't care. So where would you place your priority in that situation?
I would, of course, value promotion.
I think that then completely supports the arguments that we've made.
Hypothetical situation, bearing in mind that there haven't really been championship teams getting into Europe unless they've just been relegated.
Right, let's use a concrete example then. Wigan Athletic, they prioritise the FA Cup, obviously. Well, not obviously, but we know it happened, over Premier League survival. They put all the rest into the FA Cup basket, and they got relegated, and they got relegated again. So let's use that example. Do you think that it was right of Wigan, or do you think it was worth it to lose Premier League and Championship status on the back of that for an FA Cup win?
Well, I mean, the FA Cup was not the only factor. Wigan were having problems off the pitch as well.
But is it not more likely that Wigan would have been able to ride out those problems to stay in the Premier League, as they had a tendency to do at that time? They were sort of similarly to Sunderland, they were kind of the escapists of the Premier League. Well, is it not more likely that had they not placed themselves under the pressure of the FA Cup and placed their eggs in that basket, that they perhaps might have had a better chance of staying up and avoiding those problems?
Or even building on that quickly before you answer, if you're saying that you would rather Villa prioritise promotion over the FA Cup for whatever reasons you have, then surely that logic then extends to a relegation battle. You'd rather focus on league survival than winning in the FA Cup.
But like I already said, winning in the FA Cup can help to build some momentum, and then you can carry it over into the league.
Yeah, it also tires your players out, and if you need all that energy to, especially for a team like Villa, who I know you're going to disagree with this, aren't a top team. I mean, they're I don't think they're going to get promoted this season.
Oh, I don't disagree with it.
I think that Villa absolutely need to just focus, forget all the other competitions, just focus on Premier League promotion. I think the FA Cup is quite frankly a distraction for them. And I think, yeah, they might get to the 5th round, but then they've given their players an extra couple of fixtures that they could really do without.
It may be a distraction, but for the smaller teams...
I was literally just going to say...
It's my opinion. So.
No, I was going to say... if you actually listen, I was going to say it's been a bit of a lengthy dugout debate. So I was going to say, going to start to wrap it up. And what I was going to say is, obviously, last thing I'm going to say is give you a chance to respond to Josh before we finish it off.
Well, yeah, what I was going to say was that for the smaller teams, it's not so much about necessarily progressing just for a chance at winning it. It's more about the, financial gains of actually reaching these latter stages, because those amounts of money for smaller teams can be the difference between, I don't know, signing a good player that can help you to win promotion or saving you from administration or whatever. It is valuable for these smaller teams, which is why I think the cup is still so important.
Okay, then.
Right.
Well, last question, for a team like Villa, who's got this Dr. Tony, who I think is a bit of an idiot, but he's very, very wealthy, obviously. Villa clearly don't need money, so that argument for, let's say, using the hypothesis of Villa needing this cup run for whatever reasons, surely the financial factor of that is taken out if they've got such a wealthy owner.
I'm never saying we needed a cup run.
You said no. That's what I'm saying. That's
well, yes.
That's what I'm saying. That then detracts
there is an example.
But I'm
on your side, Josh.
Because I'm saying no. I'm saying well, they're anomaly. I'm using Villa because you said that you prioritise the league over the FA Cup, and I'm saying well, they shouldn't. I'm saying that the league is more pertinent to Villa because they got this wealthy owner. They don't need all these extra competitions, therefore it isn't relevant. They don't need it as much in their promotion push.
Yeah, I'm saying it because we're a team that's pushing for Premier League promotion. We're not like a team, take Yeovil, for example, who are struggling for survival in League Two, who would far greater benefit from the money.
So but surely it's also a game that they can do without if they're pushing for survival. But anyway, what were you going to say, Adam?
Right. No, I'm going to bring the debate to a close. What I'm going to do, because we've been going on for a while. good debate. I think genuinely quite an even debate. Might split opinion. Let us know down in the comments if you are listening, or tweet us at In the Dugout TV. Is it In the Dugout TV?
Yeah.
Is that our Twitter at? Yeah.
It's-
And just follow us on Instagram because we're sick. But let us know what your
doesn't
thoughts.
have-
Has the cup lost its magic? Does the cup still have its magic in the sense of helping the sort of smaller teams gain some momentum for promotion pushes and giving them some sort of financial boost that could have a greater impact on them than we might be able to imagine as supporters of big teams? Let us know what you think. And yeah, I think that brings the entire show to a close. It's been a good one. Good to be back. Hopefully we'll be posting these a little bit more frequently. If we can get ourselves organised. We've actually found a day we can do, so hopefully more frequent uploads coming from our side. But yeah, thank you very, very much for watching and listening. Hopefully we will see you next time. And until then, goodbye.
This program is dedicated to League One Bible.